Hello there, all my lovely jewelry makers. I'm Christina at CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how you can make your own cute rose toggle clasp just using wire. So you can make it in any colour you would like to match your piece of jewellery. And it then also adds a nice decorative touch, so if you want to learn how to make your own, then keep watching. So then the wire that we're going to need is first of all a 0.8mm, and this is going to be our base wire and the structure of the piece. And then for the weaving wire here, we're going to need a 0.4mm, and these are both regular round copper wire. And then I'm going to use a selection of different pliers here. Now of course I'm going to use my trusty flush cutters and chain nose pliers here. And then I'm also going to be using my 6-step bell making pliers that I love to use a lot as well. It's just here so you know exactly what size loop you're going to get, and I can make them consistent. And then finally I'm also going to be using this pair of pliers. So again, it's kind of like the 6-step bell making pliers, but it only has 3 steps and they are substantially larger. Now you don't have to use this specifically, or even the 6-step bell making pliers. You can use round nose pliers instead of them, and you can also just use something else you have handy, or a mandrel of some sort. But I'm going to be using these pliers here. I find them very handy. And that way you can also make sure you're going to be consistent with the size if you want to make multiples. So these are just the pliers we're going to be using. And like always, I'm going to leave links in the description box down below that might be helpful. Otherwise, let's get all our wire and pliers ready and let's get started. So I'm going to start out making the loop part of the clasp, and for that we're going to use 50 centimeters of our 0.8mm, and like I said, this is the base wire. And then 80 centimeters of our 0.4mm for the weaving wire. And straight away I'm going to use these 3-step pliers here. So this is literally just to basically help create the shape and size of the loop. So that's why you can easily use something else like a mandrel, anything you have handy that has the round shape obviously, but then about the size that you want. It doesn't even have to be the precise size, but just roughly. So I'm going to be using the smallest one here just because I don't want my clasp to be too big and bulky, but obviously it's completely up to you. Then we need to grab our length of wire, and I'm placing that in my pliers, and I'm roughly in the middle of the wire. Again, it doesn't have to be precise, but just roughly in the middle. And then I'm going to start bending the wire around to pretty much get this circle shape, and that's where you can also then start to kind of see how much in the middle you are. That's pretty centered, to be fair. And we basically want to achieve a full circle. So we overlap the wires, the ends, bring that around to make sure we get the whole circle shape there. And you might find that it will spring open a little bit so it doesn't go completely to that size on the pliers, but that's perfectly okay. Like I said, it's not a precise size. It's really up to you as well what size you want your loop to be. But I have them now overlapping, so we have a full circle here. I then move on to using my chain nose pliers, and I'm going to place them. I'm just going to place them on the wire here that's at the top. You see they overlap there. And I basically want to place them where the wire starts to go straight. Again, so making sure that we do have that full circle. And then all I'm going to do is, because this wire is the top one, I'm just going to use my index finger as a bit of a cushion behind, and then basically put a more or less 90-degree angle bend into it, straight upwards, so it comes away. Something like that. And then you'll be able to find that the whole circle will more easily fit and be a complete circle like that. And what you can do as well is this length, obviously it's going to be a little bit in the way, and it's a bit of a length to maybe poke your eye or something. Want to be careful with that. So you can always just gently put a bit of a curve into it to bend it and basically make it shorter and not as dangerous. Just to kind of out of the way a little bit, because as long as it's a gentle curve like that, it can easily be straightened back out. I'm then now going to grab a 0.4mm length because it's time to start doing some weaving, because we have the circle in place here, so you can see, but we only have one wire going all the way around. We want to create some more strength in the piece, so we're going to, this wire here that's kind of starting or finishing off the circle, it's going to start and actually go around again, so we get two base wires forming the circle. But to help that, we need to weave them together, so that's what the weaving wire is for. So I'm just starting towards one end, and you can just start a bit further up the wire here, making sure we need to attach it to the wire that's not been bent. So I'm just attaching it towards the end, just leave a short tail to have that to hold on to. Literally just wrap it around twice, and then make sure the wraps are nice and tight, close together, because this is also going to be the weave straight away, like that. And then we can just take it and push it down the wire and get it to sit where we need to start. So I basically want it to be starting where the other wire is bending upwards. So I'm going to place it around there, kind of hold on to it again using that short little tail to help hold it in place to begin with. Now the weave I'm going to be doing is 2 around a single wire like we just did, then twice around both wires, and then 2 around single wire, 2 around both wires, and that's basically the weave. So now, because I just did 2 around the single wire, I need to go over the top of both wires, which means the same wire, but the other wire is then the one that's already creating the circle. So I'm going to bring it over the top and then kind of push it down through. You can just do it this way, pushing it down with a curve instead of going to the end every time. That way you also avoid kinks more likely. And just gently pull it through like that. So you can see it now comes over the top of both wires, come back underneath, and then back over the top again, down through the circle, pull it through, and just make sure that the wraps are sitting next to each other instead of crossing over each other or anything. So that's now twice around both base wires. So because we're coming around the circle again, that's going to act as 2 base wires, even though technically it's the same length of wire, but that's not important. So that means I'm going to go around the 1 base wire, which is going to be the outer one then. So it's always the one we go around by itself now. So once, twice, and again continue to make sure that the wraps become nice and tight, and if you need to, you can always grab your pliers and just gently push them together, tighten them up a bit. And then obviously right now this is straight out to the side, so what I like to do, instead of worrying about we need to use another plier to kind of shape this, you literally use the shape that we've already created with the wire initially. So I kind of just do this as I go and a little bit at a time. So now I can see this is kind of coming straight out, so I want to start pushing it towards the other wire, so the circle we already have a little bit, so closer, so something like that. That means I can now go over both of them and they're laying in the right position. Once and twice, same weave, and then again just around the outer one by itself, twice as well, once and twice, like that. Tighten it up, and then you just judge basically whenever you need to kind of push it close again. So if you feel it's close enough, you can just do your next wrap, otherwise you can just gently push it a bit closer and then you do the next wrap. So basically, as you can see, we're using the circle we already have to help create the outer circle, as it's literally just following along. And all you gotta do is continue this twice around both, twice around the outer one. And as you can see, we're working our way further away from where we started, where the wire there has that bend to it. Now also just make sure that it is pushed all the way down to that bend before continuing much further. But you just continue like this, making your way all the way around, and keep moving this around when you need to. And again, also these wires, if you find that this is going to start poking you, you literally just then gently curve it in the other direction. So once you make it all the way around with the weaving, you can see it meets back up with where we started out. Then we basically just have to finish off the ends of the weaving wire, because that's all we've got to do for weaving on the loop here. So what we need to make sure of though is that the wraps that we've done, the very last ones before we cut anything off, is around a single wire. So we don't want to cut off the weaving wire right after we've done a wrap around both base wires, but just around a single wire. So just make sure of that, and then otherwise we can go in and cut off the excess. And again, use your chain nose pliers to always make sure to push any little ends down, kind of tuck them in between the base wires. And I have the other one here, and that one, the last wraps I did, was around the single outer wire there. So I'm just going to kind of continue as if I was going to do another wrap, but instead of actually doing it, I'm just going to cut off the excess. And then there's a short little end sticking out. And then just going to make sure to push that in. And I like to kind of roll it a bit, because then it gets tucked in between the base wires. So there we go. We now have the basic loop in place, and because we've gone around with the base wire twice and we weaved all the way, it's pretty sturdy in itself. Then next I'm going to grab my 6-step bell making pliers here. Again, you can use round nose pliers, that's up to you, but what I'm going to do is use the second smallest step on this. It's just personal preference. And I basically want to create the loop that we need to have to be able to attach our clasp to anything. So obviously to use jump rings, for instance, to attach it to our jewellery. And I basically place it on the wire that we've been using to go around the second time. And I want to create my loop going away from the piece. So just bring the wire around. You can see we're creating a circle there. And that also then fits with lining up with where the other wire is. And then I'm going to bring the excess here underneath. And basically have it go in the direction towards where the other wire is. But I've got my full circle there. You can always adjust it a little bit more, maybe roll it a little bit further. But then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab my chain nose pliers again, and I'm just going to place them on this circle I just made, just to basically kind of ensure that it stays in place. I then want to bring this wire that we brought underneath up through the loop. So I'm just going to push it through like this. And again, this is creating a curve, so it's not too bad for straightening back out. Pull it through, and as you can see, there's a little bit of a curve to it, but you can just straighten it back out. And then I've kept the circle there, and if you need to straighten it out, just do that. But then otherwise, I want this length that I brought through to basically come up and sit right next to the other one. So they're now going to both be sticking straight up next to each other. So something a little bit like this, because then they're in position to basically now start creating the roses. And again, I like to just start out by holding onto that loop with my pliers, just when we're initially going to start doing it here, so it doesn't go out of shape. Because obviously if we move this wire around that we brought through too much, that will actually affect that loop. So by holding on to it, we avoid that. But then what I'm going to do is these two wires that are going straight up next to each other, while having my pliers on the loop, I'm going to take the left one, that was the one we bent originally, cross it more towards the opposite side, so towards the other wire, and then the wire we brought through that also created that loop in the opposite direction. So I'm basically just crossing them there a little bit, and then I'm going to start. If you're familiar with how to make simple little roses with wire, we have the two lengths here, and we're going to continue to go around and around in kind of a spiral form, but we're going to basically twist the wire as we go, and that's what creates the effect. So I'm just going to grab this length here, and we're going to start at the very center of the rose. So that means I'm just going to bring this around first, to basically also lock them a little bit in place. So you can just remove your pliers whenever you need to, feel ready to. So it's kind of locked around the other wire a little bit. I've literally just wrapped it around. And then what you're going to find is the wires are going to kind of keep chasing each other. So right now, the one that I just brought around the other wire is now kind of the one in front. And the other one here, I'm then going to kind of flatten down a little bit and then bring it, chase the other one, but make sure I bring it underneath it to then come in front and be the new front one. Like that. And then I go back to the back one now. Move it towards the other one, make it chase it, bring it underneath, and then it's the new front one. And then, as you're going to start to be able to see, is we're kind of growing the rose from the center, and that's that spiral effect we get. And it's this motion of bringing the back one underneath the other one to be the new front one. That's basically twisting the wire along the way. Now I'm just going to keep going like this, and that's going to gradually enlarge the rose more and more. And it's really up to you as well how you want this to look. So basically how large you want your roses to be. So you determine that basically from when you stop this process. So just continue doing this until you have your rose the size that you want. So obviously you can do it kind of like how I'm doing, where I like to do the middle one, the largest, and the two, one on either side, a bit smaller. Or you can make them all the same size. That's completely up to you. So this is how I want my middle rose to look. So I've ended up on this side here. So from here, I'm just going to go straight on to doing the next rose. And because I've ended up on this side, I'm just going to do the rose here first. Doesn't matter really what side you do it on, because obviously we're going to move to the other side anyway. So what I'm going to do is, I kind of want to just bring the wires into position. So I'm going to take this one here and kind of bend it more straight out towards where I want that next rose to be. So we get the wires coming in the right direction. And then what I want to do is kind of find out where I want the middle of it to be. So like I said, I want my roses on the sides to be a bit smaller, so you need to take that into consideration if you want that. Because where the middle of the rose is going to be, and then obviously to one of the sides, is half the size of the rose. So take that into account to when I place my pliers, I'm going to then bend it straight up. So that means where this wire is bending straight up, that's going to be about the center of the rose. So obviously, is going to kind of be twice the size of the length from that bend to where the wire is coming from. Now I'm then going to take the other wire here and just maneuver your wire however you need to. Bend it towards the wire that we just bent upwards. I just want to make sure I don't have my other rows going out of shape. And then basically I'm going to use this wire that I'm bringing towards the other wire to create the center of this rose. So that means right where that bend is, I'm going to then take this and wrap it around the wire that we bent straight up, but right where the bend is, right on top of that bend. So basically something a bit like that. We've got the center of the rose started now. Then, otherwise, the creation of this rose is exactly the same. I'm then going to kind of flatten this wire that was sticking straight up down. And that's now behind the one that I just used before. So obviously we need to bring that towards the other one, underneath it, to then become the new front one. So like that. The back one, bring underneath the other one, become the new front one. And it doesn't matter what direction you're creating the rose in, one way or the other, because obviously it's meant to have quite an organic look. So don't worry if you kind of feel like, oh, you're going in the opposite direction, doesn't matter. So just keep going like this. And now I'm gonna judge this, and I think because I want my side ones to be smaller, I think I like the look of that. So it's almost a bit more like a rosebud, the ones on the side, then the middle one is more like a blooming rose. So at this point I kind of feel like I'm done with this one. Like I said, you can make it larger if you want to. So now what I want to do is bring these wires towards the opposite side, because obviously that's the last rose that we need to do. So the one that I just kind of brought around, instead of continuing to create this rose because it would make it bigger, which I don't want now, I'm going to push it down through the loop a little bit, but just so I can maneuver this wire underneath the large rose in the middle to basically hide it. Just push it underneath that rose and come towards the opposite side. And then obviously we need this wire bringing with us as well. Just bring that down, finish off that rose. And then also bring that underneath the rose in the middle. Now you can maneuver this a little bit, figure out what works best, how the wires fit. Gonna kind of sit underneath there, you can see from the back. Just try and kind of hide them the best you can. Push them as far in underneath as possible. You can always also use pliers to help you position anything. But then, otherwise, the same principle goes here. We need to create the final rose in the exact same way. So let me just see where the wires are. I'll grab this one here and bend it out towards where I want that rose to be, just like we did on the other side here. So bend the first wire there in the direction, and then figure out where the center of the rose is going to be. And that's where we then need to add the bend to bring that wire straight upwards. So like that. And that's how we're starting out the rose. Then I grab the other length. Now as you can see, it can be a little bit fiddly because the roses are kind of moving around a little bit. They are obviously fastened because it's all the same length of wire. But because we're making more roses, we're kind of making the surface area of them bigger. And they can move a little bit. But then wrapping this around the wire that we bent, something like that, and then same principle, flatten that down, and then we get back into that same technique of going underneath. That's the new front one. The back one goes underneath to be the new front one. And we're just building up this rose in the same way. And this one I'm aiming, in my case here, because I want the two outer ones to be smaller, but I kind of want them to be the same as each other, you know, as much the same as possible. So I'm basically aiming for the size of this rose to be similar to the smaller one on the other side. And once you reach that point, then basically it's a matter of just finishing it off. So just judge however yours looks and how everything will work out. Obviously it might be different, but I'm going to grab this length of wire here, and then I'm going to kind of continue, but I'm going to start bringing it underneath the rose because I don't want this rose to grow anymore now. I'm happy with how it looks. And then basically it's a matter of, like I said, finishing off the ends, but also to kind of fasten everything a little bit more. So that will all depend on how yours looks. I'm going to see if I can, yeah, I think I should be able to take this wire and continue it. It's now currently underneath that rose. So continue to bring it around and basically get it in between that and the large one, but still underneath. And then I just want to kind of bring it around the large one here with the aim of fastening it more. And you will also pretty quickly be able to tell that now instantly already it doesn't move as much, as you can see there. So that is basically the aim as well. And then you just continue into a place where you feel you can then finish it off. So I'm happy with that one. Then just going to bring the other one into a position like that as well. So continue this around by also bringing it underneath, and then figure out where I can put this. Wonder if I can also get this through underneath. Yeah, that works pretty well. And again, bring that around the top there. And then here it's a matter of kind of finishing it off once, so nothing is going to be sticking out and away. So obviously it can catch or scratch in clothes or skin, but also so it's kind of secure and holds the roses in place there. So I'm going to take my flush cutters, and then I've got this length coming through. I can see the end, so I'm just going to cut off the excess, but leave a little length, because then I'm going to take my chain nose and I'm just going to bend this more into place so it kind of locks around more. And I'm making sure obviously the end is going to end up underneath the roses, but on the opposite side of the ring, the loop that we made. So I don't want it to be close to the skin or anything. I'm tucking it away, so that end is going to be out of sight and out of mind basically, and it's nice and secure. And the same thing with the last one, just figure out where you can finish it off. Cut off excess. And the main aim is basically to, obviously for it to be secure, but to get rid of those ends. Tucking them away nicely. Something a bit like that. So you can always run your fingers over it to make sure you can't feel them anywhere. And obviously if you can, you need to tuck them away a little bit more. But otherwise, then go back to the front. And this is then a finished loop, part of the clasp. So we have the roses kind of covering up the joints and the kind of collection or connection points. But obviously it adds nice decoration as well. We have the loop itself, which is nice and strong and also decorative in itself. And obviously that loop that we need to be able to attach it to a piece of jewellery. So now to create the toggle part of the clasp, we need a length of a 0.8mm of about 30 centimeters. And again, this is the base wire. And then we need a length of a 0.4mm as well of about 40 centimeters. So I'm starting out with my length of 0.8mm here because we need to make the basic shape first, and also I'm going to be using my chain nose pliers. So what I'm going to do is place them roughly about the midpoint, so we have almost even lengths on both sides, because the toggle part I want to go across the middle. So just a little bit to the side from the middle there. Doesn't have to be precise because we have a little bit of leeway in the wire. So I'm placing my pliers where I want the first bend to be, which is going to be the end, one side of the toggle. And then I just want to bend my wire so it goes completely along the side of itself like this. And you can see we have almost even lengths left, but we're going to do the bend on the other side as well. Now what I want to do with this is tighten it up, because right now, as you can see, it's a little bit open, so I want to tighten it. It's kind of like making a prong. So what I like to do is hold my hands as close to the end as possible, and then I like to get it down towards the back of the pliers, because I feel that's where you have the most control. And then you literally just start squeezing it, try and keep it flat. Now you might find that it might kind of turn over like that. That's fine, just bring it back and just tighten it up, as you can see. So now we don't have that same gap. Now I like to just leave, so there's a tiny little space right at the end there. Kind of a little bit air coming through, as you can see. Then, at this point, like I said, this is one end or one side of the toggle clasp. So of course we need to do the other end as well. So I'm just going to place my pliers. Now if you do have a length that's a bit longer, place your pliers on there, because that's the wire that we want to bend then. Use up some of that length to make it more even. And then what I want to do is, obviously here we need to kind of get the sizing right as well. So I'm not doing a specific measurement. You could do, but what I actually like to do is, that's why I make the loop first, because then I'm going to compare it to that and basically judge where I want the bend, the second bend here to be. Because we want it to be about the width of the loop, but just a tiny little bit more. So we don't always want it to be too wide, because that's going to be unnecessary. But about the width of it, but just a little bit more is what I like to do. Just so it catches nicely when the clasp obviously is in use. So we kind of get the hint there. So that's where I want my bend. So that means I'm gonna then take this length where I have my pliers on, and also same principle, bend it right against the pliers all the way to go in the opposite direction, so it comes down next to itself. As you can see, they kind of overlap now, but don't worry about that. And again, same principle here. I just want to tighten this up to basically get it the same as the other end. So something a little bit more, a bit like that. Now if we look, kind of have this toggle now, but obviously the wires are coming out and overlapping a bit, but that's more or less the basic shape of the toggle. So now we need to deal with the remaining lengths. So then again, using my chain nose pliers, then when I go in and on one side here, one of the wires, I want to place my pliers and put a bend into it, but where it's going to be basically that bend is going to end up being in the middle of the toggle itself. So just placing my pliers where I feel it's going to be. So somewhere like that. And then I'm going to take the wire and bend it straight upwards. So it's going to be sticking out at an angle, more or less 90 degrees like that. And then obviously just make sure it's in the middle, because you can then adjust it a bit if it's not. But I think I'm pretty happy with that. And then I'm going to then take my, in this case, 6-step bell making pliers, because like I said, I like making sure I know what size loop and to get the same size loop if I want to. But again, you can use round nose pliers. But I'm just going to be using the second smallest one. And then I need to place this on the other wire that we didn't bend yet, but just below where we did the bend. So again, this loop that we're going to make is going to end up in the middle. So we end up with something a bit like that, and I'm going to start bending this. Let me just have a look. You can always bring it out a little bit more if you can't quite get your pliers in there. Just place the pliers and then bring the wire all the way around to create that loop. And we can just, the good thing about the loop here is if you feel like it's not quite in the middle, you can just roll it either more one way or open it up more the other way to kind of adjust where it is. And bring it further around. And I'm making sure for this wire that I'm bringing around to come up and be on the same side of the toggle as the wire that I bent. And more or less coming down next to it. And let's just check here if this is more or less in the middle. I feel like it just needs to move just a little bit more towards the right here. So I'm just going to roll it a bit along the wire, you could say. And then judge. I think that's pretty good in the middle. And then that wire, like I said, that created the loop is now coming around the side of the other wire that we bent straight up. So it looks a little bit funky right now, but this is the point where then when I get in my weaving wire to the 0.4 mil, because obviously we need to kind of strengthen this up and tighten some of this in place as well. So I grabbed the length of 0.4 mil that we cut ready, and I want to start in the middle of that as well. So again, just making sure I have somewhat even lengths on both sides and just grabbing onto the middle there. And then I want to start wrapping. We're just going to basically wrap the toggle part to strengthen that but also keep the wires together. So I'm just going to start from the midpoint of the toggle, which is why I want to start from the middle of the weaving wire. And I'm placing it basically on the side here where I then have the wire going straight up, that wire. I'm placing it below the two wires, you could say, the same wire but it's next to each other, or itself. And then all I'm going to do is start wrapping this around both at the same time. We're not doing a fancy or specific weave or anything. We're literally wrapping around both wires as if they were one, more or less. And then try and push this as far in as it'll go. Basically, as close next to that bend as possible. And then we just keep wrapping here, making sure the wraps are nice and close together. You can always push them closer together along the way if you need to. And we're working our way towards the end of this side of the toggle. Just tighten up the wraps. You can see we're almost there. And pretty much we're at the end now. Now obviously we also need to finish off our wires, so we can't just have the end, say, of the 0.4mm sticking out randomly either. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to wrap to the point where you can't see the base wire. I'm going to make sure to leave just a little bit kind of peeking out, and also you can see on the back. So I'm just going to leave it there for now, because before finishing off, might as well just continue with the other side. So what you can just do is, if you need to just wrap an extra time or two around the same way, you can do that. But otherwise, what we need to do is use this length to obviously wrap around the other side. So all you do is literally bring it underneath those two and wrap around them as if they were one, and just continue. And again, you can use your pliers and just help push them as far in as they'll go. And then just keep wrapping. Same principle all the way to the end here. Again, until we just have a little bit of the base wire showing. And then straight away we might as well get rid of the excess here. So what I like to do is kind of go around to what's going to be the back. Just bring it around to there and then cut off the excess, but making sure that where I cut off the wire is obviously right now sticking out, but is where if I then take my chain nose and squeeze that in, the end of the 0.4mm is going to basically be tucked in side of the bend that we did on the base wire. So it kind of gets tucked in like that, the very end, and gets tucked away. Same principle on the other side. Just bring it around to kind of cross over so we can see where we need to cut the wire. And then make sure to squeeze it down so it gets tucked away. And that's just how we finish off the 0.4mm, nice and securely. So now we're left with, we have basically the toggle in place, but we're just left with the lengths of the base wire, and obviously to finish it off, but also just to add another little decoration. So again, I'm just grabbing my chain nose pliers and then placing them on the loop that we made, just to kind of help hold that in place so it doesn't go out of shape while we're working with the other wires. And then this length that's coming around the side of the wire that's going straight up, that's creating the loop. I'm going to bring around, so just continue around that other wire going straight up in the same direction that it's naturally going. And just bring it all the way around, right at the base. And basically back to where it started out. Now if you need to, you can just push it down a little bit just to make sure it's as tight as possible. And then we need to do the decoration, so basically I'm going to add a little rose to this as well, which obviously makes it work nicer with the loop, but also it finishes off the wires nicely as well. So we kind of have something to do with them. Now this is going to be the very center of the rose, and then I'm taking the wire that's going straight up and just bending it down, making sure it's behind the other wire, and then I'm going to start to bring it as we're doing that rose shape in the same way towards the other one and come underneath and be the new front wire, and then the other one underneath that and the new front wire, so the exact same way that we did the other roses. And here as well, however you ended up with your wires, it doesn't matter what direction you go or the other way, it completely doesn't matter, it's going to be the same result. It's just however your wires ended up. And keep going around, and again this is up to you really how large or small you want this to be. I kind of want it to not be too large, but also obviously kind of cover up this nicely. I like for it to not cover the loop completely, so you can still see a little bit, but not too much. So I'm just going to keep going here. I think I'm getting to the point where I'm happy with the rose. And let's have a little look. Just try and see. And I also kind of judge it based on how it looks centered compared to the toggle. So if I try and just bring that underneath. So if I say this is more or less it, I bring it underneath the rose now, as you can see, kind of in between the rose and the toggle, and then I bring this around as well. That will basically be the last petal in the rose, and it looks like that. I think it looks pretty centered, and I'm happy with the size. So I'm now just going to I'm just taking the front one first and bringing it around more, but making sure that it goes underneath the rose, and just basically wrap it around underneath the rose, in between the rose and the toggle, and that is how we're going to secure it. Because obviously we want to finish off the wires now, but we want to do it and not have the ends sticking out somewhere random. So cut off the excess, and because we then wrapped around underneath the rose there, it's going to be secure. And just get my pliers in there, cut off the wire, and then just make sure to kind of push in the very end out of the way, so obviously you can't see it or feel it and it won't catch on anything. And of course we have the other end as well, so just bring that around, same principle, gets wrapped around so it's secure, and then we just go in and cut off the excess, and then just make sure to push that down, because right now you can kind of see it sticking out. We want to make sure it doesn't, but also so we can obviously use that loop and attach jump ring or whatever to be able to attach the clasp to a piece of jewellery. So just push that in place, and basically when you've done that, you have your finished toggle part. And as you can see, the loop is just peeking out, and you do have space to be able to add a jump ring or something like that. And then we have both our loop and our toggle finished, so it's now a functioning clasp. And obviously just use these loops that we have kind of peeking out from underneath the roses to attach it to whatever piece of jewellery that you want. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial for how to make your own rose toggle clasp. And if you do end up making it, I would love to see if you want to share it, so you can tag me on social media. You'll find the links to the ones I'm on in the description box down below. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this one, and I'll see you in the next one.